promises, Taiwan pledges more renewable energy sources and to become a leader in a fight against climate change. A safe haven as the conflict rages in their home country. We speak to the Ukrainian scholarship students who have just arrived in Taiwan. Noah's Ark goes green. We meet Taiwan's plant warriors trying to preserve disappearing species.
I'm McLeod for TaiwanPlus, here in Bakasan Forest in Miaoli County, home to the Tsai Indigenous people, with a report on how they are regaining access to their ancestral lands and reviving their culture and community.
A warm welcome to Taiwan Plus News. I'm Betty Chen. Taiwan's president rang in Earth Day with calls for the country to become a world leader in combating climate change. Proposals to make Taiwan a green energy development center was the focal point of her speech at an environmental forum. The event in Taipei was attended by high-level politicians, business leaders, and diplomats. She also outlined plans to invest in cleaner energy sources like hydrogen and geothermal power.
我们要打入全球绿色供应链，无论是制造业的制程改善、交通部门的运具的电气化等，都要做出结构性的调整。
Taiwan's government has announced its roadmap to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050. It's part of the country's efforts to join the international fight against climate change. But as Bing Wang reports, some environmental experts say the plan is not aggressive enough.
Fulfilling a pledge made by President Tsai ing-wen on Earth Day last year, Taiwan has officially released its roadmap to achieve zero carbon emissions by 2050. It's part of a global effort to reduce the impact of climate change and to build a more sustainable environment. The main feature of the roadmap is to increase the country's renewable energy supply to at least 60% by 2050. In comparison, South Korea anticipates getting 60 to 70% of its electricity from renewables by 2050, and Japan's goal is 50 to 60%.
I want to assure you that we are doing everything we can to stabilize electricity supply. We also plan to further strengthen our energy infrastructure, including, of course, the grid, while navigating the transition to more sustainable and renewable energy sources.
According to the latest statistics from Taiwan's Bureau of Energy, currently 5.5% of Taiwan's energy comes from renewables, 44.9% from coal, 35.7% from natural gas, and 11.2% from nuclear power. The government plans to spend 900 billion Taiwan dollars or $31.5 billion US dollars by 2030 to diversify its renewable energy sources. And beginning in 2024, taxes will also be levied on companies exceeding 25,000 tons of carbon emissions a year. That tax will be used to develop low emissions technology. Taiwan's National Development Minister says it will take the effort of both the public and private sectors to achieve this goal.
这个计划的推动过程当中，也会吸引很多的这个民间投入。那这个投入大概主要在未来的2030年，最主要的当然还是太阳能光电跟离岸风电的一些投资。那经济部已经设定的增加的这些额度，所以这两项加起来的话，吸引民间的投资可能就会超过3兆台币以上。
John Liu, an environmental expert from National Taiwan University, says the roadmap is necessary because of the country's high carbon emissions.
Taiwan, in terms of the emission of the entire country, we rank around 21. So we emit about 270 million tons per year. And globally, we emit a little bit over 0.5%. But in terms of per capita level, actually Taiwan's contribution is substantial.
But he says while it's an important first step, the roadmap should have more ambitious goals.
As for now, we are looking at only 20%, 30% emission reduction at 2030. And that goal is much lower than most other countries. And if we are really serious about 2050 net zero, we have to be very aggressive right here, right now.
This is the first major plan Taiwan has announced to reach net zero. While environmentalists welcome any efforts to lower Taiwan's carbon emissions, they hope the roadmap will continue to be revised to meet loftier goals. Chris Ma and Bing Wong for TaiwanPlus.
Health Minister Chen says Taiwan may eventually have to live with COVID-19, suggesting a shift in the government's messaging about the pandemic. Chen says the country will effectively be living with the virus once the infection rate hits 15 to 20%. Even with the recent spike in cases, the rate now sits at just 0.17%. Taiwan recorded 3,859 new COVID-19 cases on Friday, setting another daily record. New daily cases are expected to break 10,000 by the end of the month. Up to now, Taiwan's approach to the pandemic has mainly focused on containment. New measures being introduced suggest a move towards avoiding disruption to daily life. After much criticism about the treatment of migrant workers, Taiwan is announcing new regulations to improve conditions on fishing boats. From July, minimum wage for foreign fishermen will be raised by $100 a month. There will be more government inspections of fishing fleets, and boats will have to be equipped with cameras to monitor working hours. Migrant fishing crews will no longer be permitted to remain at sea more than 10 months at a time. The move comes after prosecutors in the southern city of Kaohsiung this week charged 9 people with violating human trafficking laws. The case was related to allegations of abuse aboard a fishing vessel. With only one train driver signed up to work on Labor Day, Taiwan's Railway Authority is putting together a contingency plan ahead of a Labor Day rail workers union strike.
表列的列车我们都停开因为派不出司机员那但是我们还是没有放弃沟通。
The workers are protesting a proposal to turn the Taiwan Railways Association into a state-run corporation. The strike is likely to affect more than 350,000 travelers over the weekend. The government plans to arrange buses to replace the suspended train services. The heads of major Taiwanese broadcasting groups and one of their networks have resigned after the channel accidentally broadcast news of a Chinese invasion. Erroneous headlines running on screen reporting missile attacks, a local volcano eruption, and an oil spill ran for 8 minutes on Wednesday morning. Taiwan's National Communications Commission has said the network violated the Radio and Television Act and could also face charges under public order violation. Rick Glauert reports.
Alarming headlines during a live show on Taiwan's public broadcaster Chinese Television System, or CTS, on Wednesday. New Taipei City hit by People's Liberation Army ground force missiles, reads this headline. Others said the president had declared a state of emergency in response to war and that ships had exploded in waters outside the country's capital city. It was 8 minutes before the station realized its error, prompting an on-air apology and call for calm.
产生这样的错误，导致民众误解，在此特地向大家致上最诚挚的歉意。
CTS blamed a technical error, saying the headlines, which also included other potential large-scale disasters, were prepared for a drill with the local fire department. But by Friday, heads were rolling, led by the station's acting president. The blunder comes amid heightened tensions with China, which claims Taiwan as its own and has recently ramped up threats to take the country by force. In the last month, Taiwan has upped its civilian warfare readiness, also partially in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, raising the nation's alert level and publishing a wartime survival handbook. The country's Communications Commission said the station violated the Radio and Television Act.
无线电视台都是关键基础设施，对于讯息的传递的正确性，应该会有更高的标准。
While the panic for Wednesday morning TV viewers may have been short-lived, CTS is now facing potential charges of violating public order and a $68,000 fine. Patrick Chen and Rick Glauert for TaiwanPlus.
Now to the latest developments in Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Ukrainian soldiers are taking a last stand in a steel plant in Mariupol as Russian President Vladimir Putin declares the decimated port city liberated. The soldiers are blockaded by Russian forces and have refused an ultimatum to surrender or die. In a televised meeting from the Kremlin, Putin congratulated his defense minister on the weeks-long bombardment. Ukraine estimates tens of thousands of civilians have died in the conflict. Local officials say that satellite imagery showing mass graves outside a besieged city are more proof of Russian war crimes. Close to 5 million Ukrainians are believed to have fled the country since Russia began its assault. In Taiwan, the nation's leading research center, Academia Sinica, has given scholarships to 12 Ukrainian students. Our reporter James Chater spoke to 3 of them who have just arrived in Taiwan. They told him how their families felt about their move here.
My parents were shocked. They just like, what? It's because in one moment I was just with my friends at some village in the west of Ukraine, like doing nothing except of my work. And at the next moment, I told them, "Okay, guys, I was accepted to the study program in Taiwan, and I'll be gone for 3 months at least." And like, what? Are you serious? I said, yes, my professor told me to do this. He like really insist on it, so I agree with him. And they're like, okay, good luck.
I wrote to many of my friends for advice, but my feeling told me that I should go to Taiwan because it's first of all, like political, we are more similar, more like open-spirited and so on.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about how, since the invasion has begun, Taiwan has kind of cropped up in conversations. Do you have any kind of specific examples of how Taiwan is kind of increasingly coming up in conversations since the invasion has begun?
So Taiwan appeared in conversation with my friends a few times, especially when we discovered that China has like neutral position in all this situation. We remember that there is Taiwan and that China and Taiwan have like the same situation. I think that Russia and Ukraine, and it's like exists the risk of invasion here. So like we discussed this topic and thought that maybe action of China really depends on the result of war in between Russia and Ukraine.
China's position is still unclear. Like they want to seem to be neutral, but in fact, it's more like they support Russia. And for sure, many people in the government are disappointed about this. And on another hand, at the same time, Taiwan is supporting Ukraine. So I think people will reconsider the relationship with these countries.
To tell the truth, the kilometers, they matter, and the people who they are more interested in something, like from the news perspective, like they're interested in something that is near them. So basically, I think that if, for example, like talking about us as news agency, so we can spread the information more, and so it also can be our other mission here.
British media is reporting that the owner of one of Taiwan's largest financial conglomerates, Fubon, is part of a consortium bidding to buy English Premier League football club Chelsea. The investment group is also said to include 2 of the world's biggest sports stars, 23-time Grand Slam tennis champion Serena Williams and 7-time F1 world champion Lewis Hamilton. Chelsea Football Club is looking for new management after the previous owner, Russian oligarch Roman Abramovich, was sanctioned by the British government following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Chelsea is one of England's biggest football teams and won the Champions League, Europe's most elite football tournament, last year. Coming up for our Earth Day special, we'll be looking at a fight to save some of Taiwan's disappearing plant species. Stay tuned.
Hi, my name is Leo Seawald. In Chinese, Li Hao. 他们叫我好哥. Welcome on my boat. 其实我们到绕河的时候，离101大概2公里，所以我们真的可以开到台北的中心。Wow, it's a little past 3 in the morning, and we are at Keelung's fish market. 看起来很开心的那个鱼是什么？
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Hong Kong is one of the few remaining places with a zero COVID policy. Tens of thousands of people have gone into quarantine this year, and while the system is supposed to keep the spread under control, it's creating a major environmental problem. John Van Trieste explains.
From the moment travelers step into Hong Kong's international airport, they enter a city wrapped in plastic, first greeted by staff covered in plastic protective gear, and then at their quarantine hotel where almost everything they touch is covered in plastic.
So you have like shampoo, conditioner, toothbrush, hand wash for every day. So I'm staying 7 days, so I have 7 of each. The meals arrive 3 times a day, so morning, lunch, dinner, and they are all provided in a plastic bag.
This may be Hong Kong's way of trying to stop the spread of COVID-19. But according to one eco-activist, it's creating a new problem, plastic piling up where it shouldn't be.
A face mask. This disposable face mask is made of plastic, and over time it will eventually become microplastics and will get into the ocean.
The pandemic may have made it worse, but Lau says the plastic problem is not a new one.
We throw away about 2,300 metric tons a day, just a day. And the plastic overall recycling rate for our plastic scrap is about 11% only. So it's a small percentage. And so the rest, nearly 90% of the plastic waste is either end up in our landfills or end up in the glacier.
Aware that Hong Kong's landfills are filling up, the government is building an artificial island with waste facilities and incinerators to help keep up. But it's also building more community isolation facilities to meet the quarantine demands of a zero-COVID policy, which will only add to the mounting disposable waste. Bill Kong and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
A growing number of plant species are going extinct due to climate change. But experts at southern Taiwan's Dr. Cecilia Koo Botanic Conservation Center have quietly battling to reverse the trend. Their fight has taken beyond greenhouses and into the wild. Our reporter Peachy Zhuang visits what some people say is a Noah's Ark for tropical plants.
Chen Junmin keeps a steady hand as he pollinates a rare Formosan mauve orchid. It's just one of the many plants preserved at the Dr. Cecilia Koo Botanic Conservation Center in Pingtung County, southern Taiwan. Founded in 2007, the center has become like a Noah's Ark for plants. It's home to more than 34,000 plant species from around the world. That makes it the most diverse plant repository on Earth.
植物对我们重不重要？其实它除了是地球上一个非常重要的一份子之外，对于人类而言，我们未来的大半辈子，甚至下一代，可能都还要靠它持续的供给。生物多样性的研究跟保存的投资，这已经有助于我们去好好的去保护这些我们自己赖以为生的资产。
The center keeps live plants of each species, instead of just storing the seeds. That way, conservators learn the skills needed for the plants to flourish, and that's extremely helpful when they reintroduce endangered species into the wild.
其实绝大多数病原原因都是人类造成的， 所以我一直认为，其实把这些物种再让它回到它的原栖地，人是责无旁贷的。
One example is the work the center has done with one of Taiwan's most iconic flowers, the Formosan mauve orchid. Researchers from Academia Sinica in Taipei have worked alongside the center to analyze the genomes of various specimens. That helps determine where the plants can thrive.
透过这种高解析度的基因体资料，我们有办法去鉴别说，个体之间的差异到哪边。确实就是说，这些台湾不同地方的蝴蝶兰，它有非常清楚的一个遗传的结构。我们希望把真正属于那个地方的蝴蝶兰种回去。
Growing an orchid at the center before replanting it in the wild is no simple task. From pollination to full-size plant, it takes 5 to 10 years. Ideally, the plants stored at the center would be able to grow freely in the wild without being disturbed. But the Formosan mauve orchid's beauty means the wildflowers are often picked as soon as they bloom.
我们现在看到很多地球上面对的问题啊，气候变迁的问题，其实都跟整个生态系的整个运作其实是有关系的。明明就是一个活生生的地球，那么多的生物，我们却把它绝大多数的生物都逼上绝路。我们并不是在救什么地球，我们只是在救自己。
保育不是只有保育学家或者是生物学家在努力的，不是只有孤芳自赏的事情，其实应该是纠团、老定节、老咖这个一起做的事情。
Just like every species has its place in the ecosystem, conservators say every person has a role to play in protecting the environment. Only with a combined effort will endangered plants like the Formosan mauve orchid again flutter freely in Taiwan's forests as they did 50 years ago. Alex Chen and Pichu Zhang for TaiwanPlus.
In the mountainous forests of northwest Taiwan, the government has enlisted indigenous people to help them manage the woodlands. As Rick Glauert reports, this new cooperation is rebuilding a tricky relationship and revitalizing a local community.
The Tsai people said a prayer before they felled this tree. Bakasan Forest in northwestern Taiwan is sacred to the Tsai people, one of the country's smallest indigenous groups.
我去抱那个树，其实我是跟他说，今天有朋友来了，哦，那今天来这里做什么？那今天呢，也要让你在这个森林的责任要完成了，希望你呢能够好好的。安安详详的躺下去，但是你不要担心，因为这块地整理出来以后，我们将会孕育出更多你的孩子，而你的责任也结束了。
Their community was kept out of this land for years, but now the government has enlisted the Tsai people to help manage the forest.
包括山林巡护，我必须要有人进来做巡护，我必须要付薪水，我必须要有一些行政上面的一些经费资源。但是我如果就地的去把这样子的一个工作的机会，去让我们的部落的伙伴来去做执行，一个是地理交通上面非常的方便，第二个是对森林资源内部的一些环境地理，其实是比我们还更了解的。
But it is not always an easy relationship between the authorities and indigenous groups.
在过去的时候，山林政策总认为说，我们山下族进入山林就要做违法的事情，这是没有的。其实我们进入到山林，就像我回来，我想看看过去我在这里接受教育的场域，我可以透过山林，再怎么样把我的文化来传承给我的下一代。
60% of Taiwan is covered in forest, and most of it is owned by the government. But many of the island's 600,000 indigenous people have their roots in these areas, and there are calls for this land to be returned back to the original inhabitants. In these woodlands, the Tsai people are now able to raise chickens, grow mushrooms, and keep bees to produce honey. the government helps them market their products.
所以在这几年来，所以没有什么工作，靠天吃饭，打零工也没有好做啊，这样子。所以从第一次就刚开始就养蜂，那慢慢的我们收入就有。
从小到大，我们都在森林里面长大嘛，哈，所以里面的一些生养，还有一些特殊的植物啊，都是我们的食材嘛。所以我觉得这个共管机制，让我们能够原住民部落里面哈，可以恢复以前我们的老人家所传承下来的一些生活以及习性，还有也可以当做我们的教育场地嘛。
With the economy flourishing, young people are moving back to the area. And in many ways, a return to the forest means a return to the traditional way of life for the Tsai people. This community is restoring its connection to the forest and rebuilding the local economy, leaving the Tsai people a little more confident that their culture and traditions can flow to the next generation. Damon Lin and Rick Lowett for TaiwanPlus.
Thanks for watching TaiwanPlus News. I'm Betty Chen. We'll leave you with pictures of the one-year-old koala in Taipei Zoo. For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, please download the TaiwanPlus app. Stay safe and see you next time.